Safeline, a charity that provides help for survivors of sexual abuse, has reported that more than 7,000 calls, texts and emails were received by Safeline's male helpline in 2021. That is more than double the number of 2020. According to their chief executive, there was a 110% increase last year. And he also estimated as many as 1 in 6 men have been sexually abused or assaulted, but very few ask for help. Rachel Stonehouse is a Newsbeat reporter and has been working on this. Rachel, tell us what you found.
Well, as you said, Victoria, the number of men seeking help for male sexual abuse or assault has more than doubled in the past 12 months. But actually, this could be a positive thing because people are feeling like they can come forward for support. And it's where TV dramas like 4 Lives play a part in this. So if you've not seen it, it's the story of serial killer Stephen Port, who fatally drugged and assaulted young men that he met on dating sites. Importantly, it tells the story of his 4 victims: Anthony Walgate, Gabriel Cavari, Daniel Whitworth and Jack Taylor, and their families fight to get justice. Now, as a result of the drama, which aired last week on BBC One, Safeline's helpline has had about a 50% increase in calls, and that is echoed by other organisations that I've spoken to as well.
Rachel, for the moment, thank you. We're going to talk now to Rory Boyle, who is 28. He's from Manchester and he is a survivor of sexual assault, and he has waived his right to anonymity because he hopes that by speaking out, it encourages others to get help and also break down the stigma surrounding sexual assault. Rory, thank you very much for talking to us. Why do you think there is a stigma, first of all?
I think the stigma hugely lies in the fact that there isn't a lot of representation or education on this topic. I mean, going back to when I was in school, I never once heard about male sexual assault, let alone consent. I didn't even really know what that meant. And I think because of that, there is this sort of shame and stigma in society that men do face, which is really unfortunate.
Are you able to tell us what your experience was like? What happened?
Sure. So I'm originally from Ireland, and I think I inherited a lot of gay shame from society. And so I then moved to London for university when I was coming out of my teens and going into my early 20s. And I suppose in one way it was meant to be one of the most exciting times in my life. And in some ways it was. But I was dealing with, like I said, a lack of queer inclusive education, and I think a bit of self-loathing, loneliness, and all of those factors, they made me vulnerable, and they made me fall victim to a man that I met on the dating app Grindr. Within minutes of speaking to him, he was inviting me over to a luxury flat. He was attractive, he was well-spoken, he was wealthy, and the idea of that scared me, but it was also quite intoxicating, and he was definitely preying on my vulnerabilities. And to cut a long story short, as soon as I got to the flat, everything that was about to happen was laid down. A lot of non-consensual sex acts took place. And he also invited a second individual over there to also sexually assault me. And crucially, I was drugged with GHB. I was forced to take that substance and also forced to take a white powder. I'll never really know exactly what that was. I think it may have been methadone, and that's very scary. But unfortunately, that's what happened to me. And it took me over 5 years to speak up about it.
And just to say, Stephen Port also gave GHB to his victims. So you essentially, are you saying, Rory, essentially you were so high, so out of it that you didn't know what was going on and you were not able to consent?
Yeah, and I mean, at the time, I didn't even know that if you are drunk or high, that you cannot consent. You know, right. I think that's one really important point. And also, you know, in the position I was in, I was not in a position to say no. I was in the flat of somebody who I didn't know, who was older than me, who had a lot of control over me in that moment. And it was almost easier to go into survival mode than it would have been to maybe try and fight him and escape that situation. And so that's what happened in a nutshell.
Can I ask if you considered going to the police?
Victoria, it's really interesting because that's the first question everybody asks me whenever they hear my story. And the truth is, at the time, I blamed myself partially for what had happened because I agreed to go to that individual's flat. But I also think subconsciously there was a part of me that knew that if I went to the police, I may have faced some of what we saw in the drama Four Lives from the Police, which was, in my opinion, homophobia and a lack of interest in helping gay individuals who have experienced crime like this.
I'm just going to go back to Rachel, if I may, Rory. Rachel, what does Safeline say? What is their advice to men who have been sexually assaulted? Do they say you must consider going to the police? What is their advice?
I think their advice is do whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
For some people, that is going to the police and reporting it. But for some people, that's not the case. But I think the main thing really is speak out and tell somebody and try and get some level of help, because actually, if you do that, then it will get better.
Yeah. And Rory, how do you feel about what happened to you 5 years on?
I have done a lot of personal growth within the last 5 years. I think that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to recovering from something like sexual assault. I mean, personally for me, Britney and the Spice Girls got me through some of the hard times, but I reluctantly accept that's not going to be the way forward for everybody. I think that, of course, I feel anger when I look back on my experiences, and I feel sadness and regret for the person I was back then. But equally, life has done a complete 180. And I would just say to any young, vulnerable queer person who's experienced something like I have, that when you are in a position where you're safe, where you feel ready to speak to a family member, a loved one, or a charity, it really does get better. I'm at the point now where I want to shout my story from the rooftops and help other people who've experienced some of the things that I did.
Well, thank you very much for talking to us. We really appreciate it. Thank you. And Rachel, thank you very much for bringing the story to our viewers. And if you want help from organisations or charities like the one that Rachel was talking about, then please go to the BBC's Action Line. It's bbc.co.uk/action line. There are loads of organisations that will be able to help you, and lots of further information and support.